Karezza is basic Tantra technique, which involves lovemaking short of orgasm, which is a higher tantric orgasm that involves the very same phenomenon as an ordinary orgasm, but without the ejaculation, because emitting the sexual fluids is debilitating to both the male and female.
Yes, Mr. Dave Bhagawan, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us here today.
Namaste, Shiva.
This is the first time that I'm chatting with you here, and I briefly got a glimpse of your YouTube channel, heard you talk about your wild experiences in your life, and I guess the first question I should ask you is, are you enlightened?
You know, that's one of those trick questions. Ramana Maharshi said that one who claims to be enlightened or claims to be unenlightened opens broad grounds for ridicule. Now, why is that? Because from the Advaita view, we're already enlightened. We're already Brahman. We're already Shiva. But we don't recognize it. That's the problem. And that's where Tantra comes in, because it leads to that recognition of who we really are in even the most mundane life circumstances externally. Internally, we're still pure consciousness and we can't be anything else. So, yeah, it's not a yes or no question, really.
I understand. Yeah, well said, well answered. You mentioned Tantra. Are you a tantric practitioner?
I have been since a very early age. I was fortunate that my mother was one of the early Western tantrikas, uh, a hippie way ahead of her time. And she was practicing something called Karezza, which was derived from tantric teachings by an Italian doctor. And she had books on it and everything. And as soon as she detected that I was interested in sex when I was about 13, I think, she gave me these books and we had, heart to heart talks. She answered all my questions and set me out on the path leading to where I am today, where I'm about to undertake a major video series on Kaula Tantra.
Talk to me what Tantra is. How would you define it for a regular person, not knowing what the word is?
Well, okay, starting from scratch without any preconceptions, the word Tantra has various definitions according to the context, like most Sanskrit words. And it can mean a set of instructions, spiritual instructions leading to enlightenment, or it can mean a work, a literary work, describing those instructions. It can also mean an initiatory ordeal, or it can mean one of the books narrated by Shiva to Shakti, which are really about compassion, great compassion. The compassion of the Lord and his consort for those beings who are stuck in conditioned consciousness. So that's really what Tantra is. Uh, it includes all aspects of life, including sexuality. And of course, this raises a big red flag for those who are into conventional religions. And they seize on this and try to make it that Tantra is only about sex, but that's wrong. It's simply about everything, including sex. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't divert or deny human sexuality. After all, sexuality doesn't deny us. Just try to be celibate, for example. Sexuality keeps reminding us that, hey, this is where we come from. This is the origin of life. Shakti, the goddess, the mother, is the mother of all, not only human beings, all creatures, and the world itself. So that's what really Tantra is about. It's a worldview encompassing all aspects of human experience and indeed life experience of all creatures.
You mentioned Karezza. I briefly had some time to reflect on this a while back. I learned about this. It's a phenomenal tool to apply in a relationship. So I'm wondering if you can delve more into that and explain to the viewers what that means.
Yes, Karezza is a basic Tantra technique which involves lovemaking short of orgasm. Nowadays, people would probably call it edging or a chastity play. Uh, it involves, in other words, every aspect of lovemaking, foreplay, emotional energy exchange, um, even intercourse, but consciously striving to avoid the ejaculative orgasm in both a man and woman, and also facilitating the energy orgasm, which is a higher tantric kind of orgasm that uh, involves the very same phenomenon as an ordinary orgasm, but without the ejaculation, because uh, emitting the sexual fluids is kind of debilitating to both the male and female. And then afterwards you have to rest, or sleep, and you feel tired and kind of dull the next day and like that. This is a big problem with seekers because, they try to be celibate by suppressing sex. But all that does is lead to a buildup of frustration and makes the sex desire all that more urgent, which is really, exactly what they're not trying to do. And then usually what happens is they wind up either having sex or masturbating or something to dull that strong desire. And so then you feel guilty, then, it's all kinds of problems involved in the conventional concept of celibacy or brahmacharya. And Karezza gets around these by allowing sexual activity, but just avoiding the gross orgasm and cultivating the subtle orgasm in the subtle body, which really, I mean, if you analyze it, good sex is a meeting or confluence of the energies of both the partners, and the physical mechanics of it are kind of secondary, really. When you get to the stage of sex as play, or even sex as art, and even higher than that, sex as worship, you have something really wonderful.
Hmm. You mentioned sexual repression. How does one repress their sexuality and what does that look like? Can you tell me more about that?
Well, ask Dr. Freud. He told us all about it. Huh? What happens when you try to repress the sexual energy is that, of course, it doesn't stay repressed. What happens is it gets sublimated and reflected in some other way. Like instead of lusting for sex, someone may lust for power or money or social prestige or any number of things that are a substitute for sex because they give pleasure. But of course, sex is unique. There's nothing else like it. You can't really substitute anything else for it. And eventually, those drives land you in a difficult situation because they create karma. For instance, the drive for power. We see this in a lot of spiritual personalities. They have an enlightenment experience, or maybe they just want the adulation of being a guru or something like that. And they maybe have the social skills or financial or political backing to create an organization with themselves at the head of it, of course. And then, they build up a lot of followers and money and material possessions, like a big ashram or a big temple. And then they have big loans, big mortgages, and they have all these followers. They're looking up to them for leadership. And usually what happens is abuse of power. I think we've all experienced that in various organizations. So I'm not a big fan of spiritual organizations. I advocate becoming an independent seeker, independent sadhu, researching the core teachings, or whatever your path is, whether it's Tantra or something else, going back to the original source materials and studying them yourself. And I think, in my experience, I got more out of that than I could from any teacher, with the exception, maybe very early or in the beginning of the path, it helps to have a connection with someone who is ahead of you. But once you reach a certain stage, you can go on by yourself. Once you contact the wisdom within, intuitive intelligence, you can pretty much chart your own course. And I think it's advisable to do so. Then you avoid all those problems that are due to leadership and politics and all that stuff.
So, in this example of somebody desiring power, going after creating influence, the driving factor underneath it all is sex and sexuality, is what you're saying. Is that fair to say?
I think, yeah, that's fair to say. I agree with Freud that suppression of sex leads to sublimation and projection.
Why do people repress sexuality?
Well, they are told that it's a good idea or even a requisite for spiritual advancement. Especially the Vaishnava type approaches to spiritual enlightenment. Vishnu is the Sattva Guna avatar. He is the incarnation of the mode of goodness. And so, sugar and spice and everything nice and everything that goes along with that. We have to be nice people and we have to have no passion or desire for anything and so on. So many of these actually authentic spiritual principles get distorted through their social projections to become actually, in a way, their own opposites. So, for example, someone trying to be celibate, well, we already went all through that, trying to suppress their sex desire, then they become interested in power or money or whatever as a substitute. So what we advocate is doing some sexual activity, and we can get as deeply into that as you want here, but it's basically you have to find your core fantasy, your core desire, the particular flavor of sexuality that turns you on the most. right? And the whole society is against this. The whole society that wants you to forget about this. And if you have sex at all, it's just for procreation or just for fun. Yeah, so uh, there's much more to sex than that. As I said, it can be art, it can be worship, it can even be transcendence, enlightenment. Uh, because as Rajneesh pointed out many times, at the moment of orgasm, the Shakti from the Muladhara chakra, the base chakra, rises up the spine to the Sahasrara and merges with Shiva. And it happens in an instant. And then it's over and you come back down again. This is why people get addicted to sex. This is why gays in particular chase orgasm as being something special, ejaculation. But the real orgasm is continuous and sustainable, where Kundalini Shakti rises of her own accord, not being pushed or pulled or, trying to manipulate her by any kind of yogic method or anything. But when you are ready, when your chakras are open and clean, she will arise of her own accord. And when that happens and she meets Shiva in the Sahasrara, then that's enlightenment. That's illumination. That's when you see the light, the capital L, light, Brahman, as coexistent with the physical universe and interpenetrating with everything, and unlimited consciousness, unlimited life energy. And you tap into that. So the enlightened person exhibits very much an open mind towards everything, doesn't condemn anything, affirms everything, especially life in its manifold and wonderful aspects. And in every form, in every action, whether, as the Tantras say, whether it's pleasurable or painful, it doesn't matter, because those are just judgments that our mind superimposes on our experience. Good, bad, right, wrong, pleasure, pain, these are just the mind evaluating our experience as to its survival value. But when we go to the experience itself directly, without this judgment, that's another aspect of Tantra. And this can lead to the enlightenment of Shakti arising, Kundalini arising on her own. That's what happened to me. That's why I can say this. Back in 1984, I was drawn suddenly. After leaving Osho's ranch, I went back to my apartment in Portland. I didn't have anything to do. I was between contracts. I was a professional technical writer at the time. I didn't have a current assignment, and my rent was paid 3 months in advance. So I just sat and watched. And I found this to be so pleasant. I continued it for several weeks. And suddenly one day, Shakti came in my room. I couldn't see her with these eyes, but I sure could feel her. And her energy was so strong. And then she touched me. I felt that tap on my forehead, Shaktipat. And boom, suddenly I could see, my third eye opened fully. I could see Brahman in the world and the world in Brahman interpenetrating. And, to use a cliche, I've never been the same.
Well, your experiences with Osho, I'd love to hear them in a future episode. I don't think we can fit it all in here, but I
Yeah,
guess
that's a wrap.
a final question, ending question I'd like to ask you is, how does one begin to practice Tantra and all the things that you discussed here today?
Study it. Go to the original materials. And oh, I have to mention this. A prerequisite for understanding Tantra as it is a deep understanding of Advaita. Without understanding Advaita, if you try to go into Tantra, you'll miss. Because Tantra is based on the concept of Advaita. By Advaita, I mean non duality, that there is one reality, Brahman, and it has no boundaries, no conditions, no actions, no even consciousness, in the sense that consciousness is one thing being aware of another thing. There's no duality, no distinction between the knower and the known and the act of knowing, or the doer and the object of action. There's no distinction. Those distinctions collapse, and we have a oneness that transcends space and time. We've done many series on these questions on our channel. The Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and many other scriptures, including some of the Tantras. And we're going to do a deep series on Tantra itself. But the important prerequisite to know is that not that everything is one, but that everything is not two. That's what Advaita means, Advaita, not two. Because when everything actually is one, there's nobody to keep score, you know? Oh, everything's one. No, there's nobody to say that everything is one or that I am one. So, like that. That's the best advice I can give. If you want to know Tantra, really, go to the source materials. But before you do that, learn Advaita.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're
We look,
welcome, and thanks for having me.
thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
Oh.